Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to the Hustle Nation podcast. Today we got a real treat for you. My guy Rob Cressy's in the house. Rob is a transformational speaker. He's a coach who helps optimize your time, energy, and well-being to become your ideal self. He specializes in personal growth, personal branding, helping you build better habits, routines, and mindsets to keep winning. Rob does a lot of different things. Coach, podcaster, podcast coach, blogger, influencer, man of many talents, and a downright motivational badass. Rob, welcome to Hustle Nation.
Chris, thank you very much. Super excited to be here.
We're very excited to have you. I've been following you now for, I think I said early on, a good 7 or 8 years, and you've given me a lot of motivation. So as we thought about, hey, who could we bring on that'd be a great guest? I thought, I know the guy. His name's Rob. So welcome. All right, Rob, what's up?
Everything. It's an amazing day today.
It is. Hey, it's Friday as we record this. Friday's always a good day. Tell the audience a little bit more about what you do.
So for me, what I do is really about helping people become their ideal self by optimizing their time, energy, and well-being. And what does this really mean? Well, for me, my life really changed when I left my corporate job to become an entrepreneur full-time, and I went to zero. I'm making no dollars, no website, no clients, no relationships, nothing. And two things happened. I became self-aware and I adopted a growth mindset. And because of this, all of a sudden I realized I was in charge of every single aspect of my life. And this became the start of lifestyle by design. And for me, one of my favorite quotes is live by design, not by default. And I help people, design their ideal self. And you're like, well, what in the world does that mean, Rob? Well, so often we live in a world where filling up one bucket, the money, success, and business bucket, is the only thing that matters. But I've seen time and time again, oftentimes with a lot of people that I work with, that might not bring you the most fulfillment. You can do things and make a lot of money and not enjoy doing it. How do I know? I did that for a decade of my own life. And you sit there and you say, you know what? There's just a lot more that I would love to do. And it really becomes how you're waking up, how you're living every single day, the lens and perspective that you create for yourself. And ultimately, this becomes about your being, the identity of who you are in the story that you tell yourself, because your being creates your actions create your results. So because of all of this, I work with entrepreneurs, creators, high performers, and leaders in really saying, hey, let's design your ideal self on a very micro level, obviously with the macro completely tied into this.
I love that. I'm smiling as you talk the whole time because I'm just feeling inspired, and that's not something I can say very easily. You pointed to working in the corporate space and then becoming an entrepreneur. I find it hard to believe that anybody could go from the corporate space to being as motivational as you are. Tell me how you got or why you got into this position, or how you came this far.
It's very simple. So oftentimes people will ask me like, Rob, what was the moment when you pulled the trigger to go from corporate to entrepreneur? And my dream was always to work in sports. And I would sit there at work for a decade of my life through a series of jobs that I did not like. And I would go to one that was a closer commute or pay more money, rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And in the back of my mind, I was like, man, I would do anything to be able to wake up every day as a creator and just talk about sports for a living. So I said, you know what? I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't give it a shot at making my dreams happen. So I quit my job, burned the boats, and went all in on being a full-time creator in making my dreams happen. So why in the world do I show up like this as the most positive person in the world, the happiest person on earth. And there's really two reasons for it. Number one, I'm no longer working in a call center. When I left college, I was unemployed for a year and a half. And my very first job was at a Fifth Third Bank call center in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was making $10 an hour in a cube farm, slinging home equity loans inbound. This job was so terrible. I did not have internet access and I did not have email address. It was the furthest away from my dreams I could conceivably be. So I knew what that was like to be doing what I did not want to do. And then number two, once I became an entrepreneur, I asked myself a question. What will help me accomplish my goals faster? Positivity or negativity? Positivity, of course. Negativity is going to take me further away from where I want to go. Therefore, negativity had no place in my life. This became a binary question, a 1 or a 0. So for me, I have no negativity in my life and I live a life of positivity because that's what will help me create everything I want.
Rob, I have to ask you about that. So you talked a lot about positivity and negativity. I've written about that in my book. I've talked about it a lot. Dustin and I have gone at length on that. And I love this subject because I feel like you are in complete control of a lot of things in your life. And one of them is certainly your mindset, your attitude. And there's positivity, there's negativity. And some people will tell you, and I think that this is another key word for I'm a realist, right? Oh yeah, I'm just realistic about things. But I think if you say that, you're technically kind of a closet pessimist. How do you feel about negativity and positivity?
Well, that's self-limiting. I mean, another way that you can frame this is, does this serve me? And this can both be an input, or does it serve me to have this perspective or this language or this way of being? So if you think about on what you just said of, oh, I'm being a realist. All right, cool. Is that actually helping you accomplish what you want for your goals? Or is that the excuse that you're masking because I'm not comfortable being uncomfortable? And you know what, Rob? I can't do that. So I'm going to say, you know what? It's just not realistic. And so oftentimes people will project what they feel, their own insecurities, their self-limiting beliefs, their judgments on you, and they might call it something different. But realistic, man, I don't live in that. For my world, normal is boring. So if I hear language like that, I'm throwing it in the trash immediately.
I love that. Well said.
Amazing. So Rob, one of the things I think is interesting, you talked about kind of going to zero. Obviously you've had tremendous success in your shift. One of the things I think a lot of times people struggle with is they look at someone like yourself, they see the success, but they don't see the journey, right? They don't see the struggles along the way. As you kind of took that leap, positivity aside, I'm sure there were times that were challenging, hurdles you had to overcome, times where you questioned yourself. What were some of those and how did you overcome those?
Well, it is actually every day for the last decade. So let's just make sure that we're on the same page right there with that.
Yeah.
Of anyone that thinks my life is only puppy dogs and rainbows, that is not the case. So why do I say that? So at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, I audited the success habits of the most successful people in the world because I was not this human. I was the complete opposite of this. I was the work hard, play hard, ad sales party bro, where boom, I work Monday through Friday. I'm going out on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm out partying. Sometimes on Sunday, we got red zone football, all of that different stuff. No growth mindset, no reading, no holistic life, any of this different stuff right there. So I like to frame this because oftentimes when you hear someone like me, it's like, oh, it must come so easy to Rob. No, I was not this human at all. I had none of this stuff. I was at zero. And that's the thing I always want people to remember. I was at zero multiple times in my life. And for this, I saw the success rates of small business and entrepreneurship. And you guys know this. It's like insane things like within the first year, 85% of entrepreneurs fail. And within the first 3 years, it's 90% or some absurd number. So I sat there and remember, I'm all in my dreams. I'm no longer working in a call center. And now I get to wake up every single day creating. So I sat there and I'm like, what is the number one thing that'll stop my dreams from happening? And you know what it is? Quitting. Because the people who give up, give up. So I became someone who specialized in not quitting, in overcoming adversity. By design, as an entrepreneur, I signed up for a roller coaster life of uncertainty where everything's completely in my control. But oh, by the way, there are going to be a series of monsters every single day nonstop that I can both control and not control, see and not see. And at all times, I need to be prepared for this because at any moment, I could just say this is too much and I give up. So I became someone who specialized in cultivating the lens and mindset of overcoming adversity. In the book that changed my life, which is my favorite book in the world that I recommend to everybody, is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And the key to this is what most people see as an obstacle or a challenge that will limit them, you see that as an opportunity, AKA the way. So for me, no matter what comes into my life, I see it from a lens of how can I make this better? I'm not trapped in this position. What is the opportunity? What is this teaching me? How do I make this good? And then I live that every single day for 10 years straight. And one of my favorite quotes is get comfortable being uncomfortable, because the more that you can seek out discomfort, the better you're going to be when more discomfort happens. Because Chris, as we were talking about before we started recording, one day I woke up super excited for March Madness. It's going to happen in 24 hours. Got the next 4 days blocked off on my calendar. And then a global pandemic happened and completely changed the world. Was it very challenging? 100%. At the same time, pretty business as usual for me. I'm an entrepreneur. That's just another thing on the horizon that I get to overcome.
I love it.
That's incredible.
So a key takeaway that I keep hearing already is you have a choice. You have a choice to wake up and see snow on the ground and say, you know what, this is going to be a great fucking day. You have an opportunity to face adversity and say, you know what, I'm going to make the most of this. And you can choose to think, you can choose to see, you can choose to hear the good, or you can choose to see the bad and the negative.
100%. So the greatest thing I have ever learned, there's going to be a lot of them, but the greatest thing that I ever learned is all around designing the story that you tell yourself. So Chris and Dustin, we both had that scenario where it's snowing outside and one person goes, man, this is crap. I live and it's cold. I can't do anything. And they just let the list of complaints just pile up. And I look out that window and I'm like, holy smokes, I can't wait to get my sled. And that perspective actually comes from the story that I tell myself. So there's a series of, it's called Declarations for me. The truth of who I am, the story that I tell myself, because the world is constantly shooting arrows at us. The news, social media, Netflix, you name it, Slack, email. The second you turn on the media, you're now on somebody else's agenda who says, I want you to think about what I'm thinking right now. And it's designed for fear, judgment, comparison, not enoughness. So boom, over and over and over and over again, nonstop. And we live in a world where the majority of people consume all of this and live that sort of life. So you look around and all the other people are consuming this and are like, it's snowing outside, it's crap. And the news is like, holy smokes, this is historic weather, crap. And you're like, whoa, everybody else is doing this. I'm going to be like this. But not me, because I am in charge, and so are you, of designing the story that you tell yourself. So, for example, the first thing that I speak out loud every single day is, I am infinite love. And I sit there and I close my eyes and I visualize my 1-year-old son and my wife and me loving to do podcasts with amazing people like you and I feel that emotion. I'm like, man, there's just rays of abundance of love just coming from me. I'm like, boom. And I anchor that in to who I am. And then I just go through a list. And the next one says, I am constant creation of who I am. And I sit there and I say, you know what? I'm in charge of every single aspect of my life in the lens that I create for the world. Boom. That's the story that I've told myself. And the key to all of this is I've created a consistent process every single day for speaking this and feeling it and visualizing it to make it who I am. So that way, when it's snowing or not snowing, I am still in control of the story that I'm telling myself and how I show up in the world in the lens that I create.
I think it's so critical. You just said a lot of things that I don't want anyone to miss. I mean, you talked about, the power of positivity is true, but it's to some extent, it's kind of like telling somebody to relax at times, right? If you just tell somebody be positive, relax, right? It has the opposite effect. But I think your point of that daily ritual, that process of getting your brain to think that way. I know for me, prior to actually having that kind of same mentality every morning, kind of that morning gratitude, it seemed goofy to me, right? It was like, really, am I gonna say these things out loud and talk about the things that I'm grateful for? But it's amazing how it changes, to your point, the lens every day, right? You start to see things from a different lens. You start to think about the obstacle as a positive. But it doesn't happen just the first day you do it. But to me, that mindset of the process of getting your head straight every single day truly was a game changer for me.
Yeah. And the analogy that I would give is it's like planting seeds, that seeds and trees are going to grow and sprout at different times. And oftentimes we would say, well, would you like more gratitude in your life? I'm like, sure. Who wouldn't want more things? All right. Well, let's create a consistency practice. But what does it actually matter? Well, today it might not matter, but tomorrow it could be snowing. Or on a very realistic level, maybe you're going to the grocery store and somebody cuts you off and steals your parking spot. Well, you could be quick to flip them the bird, to be angry, to go into that grocery store and be seething, come home and tell your wife, I can't believe this idiot that went and cut me off at the grocery store. Then you jump on Twitter and you're watching a sports game. And then all of a sudden you start spouting off about how this player sucks. And you've allowed one negative moment to cascade and create a snowball of negativity in your life. Or if you planted a seed of gratitude in the morning, and one of the things that I do, and Chris, you saw this in my post today, is every day, twice a day when I brush my teeth, I use that as a trigger to say 3 things that I'm thankful for. So it's like, I'm thankful for Dustin, I'm thankful for Chris, and I'm thankful for my 1-year-old son. Boom, done when I'm brushing my teeth. So now I've planted that seed so that when somebody cuts me off, I'm not immediately quick to judgment. I'm like, oh, well, moving on. I was listening to an awesome podcast anyways. I'm already thinking about being on Chris and Dustin's podcast, and that's super exciting. I'll go and find another one, and boom. And oh, by the way, negativity isn't going to serve me anyway, so it didn't even enter my mind in the first place. So think about the differences between those two scenarios. The person who gets angry, and we know in life there is always going to be people cutting us off and stealing our spot. So that is why we anchor in gratitude, so that we can have more of it in our life for when the inevitable people cut us off and steal our spot.
That's amazing. Rob, you've said a lot of things indirectly that tie back to habits and routines. And on your website, you talk a lot about that. I'm guessing, and you can tell us more about this, that is really how one changes, because thinking one way optimistically and positively is a great start, but in effort to make change in your life, you have to change your routines, your habits, your behaviors, right? Can you talk about that?
You've got it. So there was a book that changed my life called The Power of Consistency by Weldon Long. And what he said is that most people do not accomplish their dreams because they just don't spend enough time going over their dreams. So right now we're recording this on January 20th, and a lot of people in the world, they just set a New Year's resolution. There's one thing, they're like, boom, this is going to be the thing that I am going to do this year. And we hear the statistics that after a few weeks, most people, not only are they not doing it, but it's no longer even a thought for them. And what Weldon talks about is creating this consistency practice where every single day you are reading your vision and going over your dreams. So really this becomes step one, intention. Step two, awareness. So now I'm aware of something. It's why so many of us will have sheets of paper or little sticky notes anywhere. Like, oh, you see something. Oh, you see something. Oh, you see something. Cool. So this now becomes a habit or a routine for you. And I think about the greatest routine I have ever created in my life that changed my life forever. And I'll go back to zero. And I'm sitting there and I audit the success habits of the most successful people in the world. And you keep hearing the same things over and over again. They always say success leaves breadcrumbs. The average CEO reads 60 books a year. And I heard it over and over and over again. And I looked and I'm like, crap, I'm reading 0 books. Think I need to do something about this. So I was like, all right, I've heard it like 50 times. It's in Inc. It's in Fast Company. It's everywhere. I'm like, this is the key for me and my dreams. So if something is important enough, you will always find time to make it happen. And for me,
Yes.
I was like, this is so important. The world is telling me, dude, this is the thing. So I sat there and I'm not reading. It doesn't mean I'm illiterate. It just means I don't read books. And I'm like, all right, when is there always time to do something? And I was like, oh, first thing in the morning when I wake up. For the last decade, every single day, weekends included, I've read a book for 30 minutes. First thing in the morning. And this was the creation of my reading routine. And so often people are challenged with creating these routines. And of course, we all love that Simon Sinek starts with why. But everything that you're going to hear me talk about today with you guys is always going to be weaved around my dreams. I did not want to work in a call center anymore. I didn't want to wake up every day not enjoying what I was doing. All I wanted to do was be a creator. All I wanted to do was talk about sports for a living at the time. So I was willing to do anything possible. And when I was told the things to do, well, now it was up to me. It's like, all right, dude, are you just going to sit here and do nothing and be that old version of you? Or are you going to create yourself into the ideal, the best version of yourself? And when I created a reading routine, I became like Neo in the Matrix, where all of a sudden he realizes he can learn anything. He's like, I can learn Kung Fu, and boom. And you read one book, so you go from like Think and Grow Rich to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, to somehow you find into the world of Gary Vee to Richard Branson to Grant Cardone, and you just start snaking through and you get to Ryan Holiday. And that that routine changed my life forever.
You know, Rob, one of the core values you've stated of you, right, is to live in action. And one of the things I'm hearing with all of this of the habits and the mindset, you're taking immediate action on those things, right? You talk about the reading the books. This isn't something that, hey, I think this would be a habit. I think this is something I want to do, but you know, taking that one small step. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what we've seen is a lot of times people will have that paralysis by analysis, right? You know, where they'll think about doing something, talk about doing something. But, you know, how have you seen to get people over that hump of stop thinking and just do?
There's 2 things, and I'll start with the simplest one. It's a phrase I learned from Ed Milet: implement at the speed of instruction. So I'm a part of Ed Milet's Arte Syndicate. It's an entrepreneurial group. And as part of it, at the very beginning, and Ed Milet's like he's 500 plus millionaire making buttloads of money. And he sits there and he's like, listen, when we teach something, you implement it at the speed of instruction, because that's what high performers do. You don't go and have to be told 2, 3, 4, 5 times to do something. You learn something, you implement it. So I was like, boom, got it. So immediately check. So therefore, everything moving forward in my life implemented the speed of instruction. Because why would I consume something to not take action on it on a personal growth, self-improvement, business, and entrepreneurship level? I'm not just some sort of knowledge zombie who's like, oh man, look at what I learned. No, there's a reason why I'm learning these things is to get better. But number two, and this is the thing that I believe the majority of the people in the world do not have, and it is so simple: non-negotiables. I would like you to write down the things in your life that are a non-negotiable. And Dustin, you talked about core values, and that's amazing. And core values and non-negotiables are similar, but core values are more of a DNA, like this is who we are and how we show up. A non-negotiable is a little bit more of an action of like, no, these are non-negotiables in my life. So for me, positivity, not negativity, even though radiate positivity is also a core value of mine. And then a non-negotiable for me is learn something every single day. Well, it's nice and simple because if I read a book for 30 minutes first thing in the morning, by design, I am better today than I was yesterday. So I've then engineered via my non-negotiables of making myself better just by doing one thing every single day. So no matter what is going on in my life, these are the non-negotiables. So sit there and this becomes your standard. And as you continually recreate yourself and self-create, you're going to realize you're going to create more and more non-negotiables in your life that says, listen, there is no questioning if I do this or not, because this is who I am.
I love that. I love that. Rob, one of the things you haven't talked about much yet is your podcast, which, by the way, is great. I love it because you've got so many really short episodes that you could listen to your podcast every morning for 3 minutes and just be instantly inspired. You had one recently called Imperfect on Purpose, and that's a subject that I'm really passionate about. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, and this speaks to all of the creators out there because this is where I came from on this. And one of the business lanes for me in the personal branding side of things is I help people launch podcasts, turn their ideas and knowledge into podcasts, both brands as well as thought leaders. And so often I was seeing perfection stopping people from even launching a podcast. They just thought that every single thing had to be perfect. But what they didn't have the vision and self-awareness of was the goal is to get your podcast launched. And then the first 20 episodes is like riding a bike with training wheels, where you're going to learn by doing. And then after that is when you can start to add the polish on things. And what I would often say is imperfect by design, where you sit there and you could love creating imperfect content. And you're like, Rob, what in the world are you talking about? Well, the opposite of imperfect content is no content. So many people will sit there and they'll record something and then they'll look at it and be like, oh, that's not good enough. Or there was a car going in the background. And what I really trying to help people to understand is we create a content filter in ourselves. And it can be sort of a paradox. So a good content filter says, if there is a construction worker jackhammering next to me, all right, the audio is all out of whack and it sounds like crap and it's a terrible user experience. That is not a good piece of content. On the flip side, if I'm talking to my camera as I'm leaving Walgreens and I just had this amazing insight happen, that's okay that it's imperfect that I'm walking out of Walgreens, because the insight of what I'm sharing is more important than me being all polished and buttoned up in a studio. And quite frankly, because most people are challenged with creating content and think that it needs to look perfect, I actually find that people find it more relatable when you're doing something coming out of Walgreens. But then here's the next level of this. So that's loving imperfect content. But Chris, what you're talking about is imperfect on purpose. And what really created me, the insight for this, which I speak in the podcast, is I was watching the Netflix series about the creation of Spotify. And I'm always listening through the lens of a coach, and they're talking about some system architecture to speed it up and not having all of the something that they need. And they're like, yeah, and we designed this to be imperfect on purpose. And I was like, so I sat there and I started to think about that term in my world. And I don't remember if it was a podcast episode or what it was, but something in my world where I created something that didn't end up being good. And I ended up creating a podcast about the imperfect thing that I created, AKA imperfect on purpose. So most people aren't going to be like, hey, Chris and Dustin, let me tell you about this thing that I messed up on. Whoa. Don't you dare tell anybody that you're not perfect, right? How dare you highlight that? On the flip side, the mastery level of content creation is imperfect on purpose, where you are so good as a creator that you can actually take the thing that you messed up on and use that as a piece of content to actually help other people. And it becomes very meta, where you look around and you're like, no matter what happens in my life, I can use that for good. Imperfect on purpose.
Rob, I oftentimes say something, and I don't know if it resonates with people, but what you just said resonates with me. And I often tell people, and I know a lot of authors that never got to publishing a book because I always said, I need to make it perfect. Well, I've always said perfect does not exist. And if you have that mindset that good is good enough, you will take action, and taking action is better than taking no action. But I agree with everything you said about content and social media and marketing. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, some of the best things that I've produced were far from perfect. And some of the best things I thought I produced performed maybe not as good. So I do think imperfect on purpose is maybe a mindset or a thought people need to have, that it's okay. Perfect does not exist. Good is good enough.
And here's the thing that is the paradox. Anybody who tells me that they're not shipping the work because it needs to be perfect, that's a self-limiting belief. So like in the hierarchy of mastery, a master knows that perfection is the enemy of greatness. So really, perfection to the person going through it thinks they're being a master. On the flip side, they're actually being an amateur, because professionals know perfection is amateur mindset.
So, Rob, when you talk about growth mindset, if somebody that's listening is saying, okay, I want to adopt more of a growth mindset, what would be the first and single easiest thing for them to start doing?
Start learning, start reading books, have an insatiable hunger to learn, because that's essentially what it is. There's a great book about this. I believe it's actually called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. That's the book that is one of the most referenced ones. And when you read that book, it's actually going to be very meta for you, because you're reading a book on growth mindset to create a growth mindset for yourself. Well, that's usually a good place to start. But what it really says is that you are not trapped in this position. I can always make things better. And you're like, oh, well, when I come from that place, I can always make things better. And what they really talk about is the juxtaposition of growth mindset, I can make things better, versus fixed mindset, I'm trapped in this position. And Chris and Dustin, this sounds a lot like what we were previously talking about with the media in the world shooting arrows of negativity at us at all times. So the people who are looking outside and it's snowing and say, this is crap, they're sitting there in a fixed mindset saying, I am trapped in this position. Whereas we sit there and we say, man, I'm so excited to get my sled, my skis, my snowboard, build a snowman, have a snowball fight, whatever it is. So all of a sudden, that lens that you create for the world, I can always make this better. I can always learn something new. And there is one quote that someone told me, a mentor of mine, and it changed my life forever. He said, Rob, if you ever hope to get paid to do what you love, you better be doing it already. I was like, all right, how do you get paid to talk about sports for a living? And this is more than a decade ago. So I was like, well, I should start a podcast. And this is before podcasts were a thing. I was like, I'll start a podcast because at least I'm talking about sports and someone can listen to it. And if I'm doing it on a microphone, I might as well learn how to do video hosting because then I've got audio and video. Well, I have no idea how to edit anything, so I got to ship the work. So I might as well teach myself Photoshop and the Adobe Creative Suite. And well, if I'm doing that, I might as well learn social media marketing because I got to distribute this stuff. And if I'm doing that, I might as well learn how to build a brand so that other people can be a part of my community. And well, crap, if I'm building a community, I might as well learn apparel, events, speaking on stage. And literally, I learned how to do everything that you're hearing right now just because I wanted to get paid to do it one day. And most people think I pop out knowing how to do these things. No, and this is actually going to blow most people's minds. How do you learn Photoshop when you're 32 years old? When you've never done a single thing in your world with the word Adobe. You're like, what in the world's Adobe? Well, nice and simple. 30 minutes a day for 6 months, I would learn something with Photoshop. Most people think I've got to go to school. I've got to go do this thing that feels like running a marathon. Or we can just chop down the tree 30 minutes at a time at 6:30 in the morning. So it's like, read for 30 minutes. Cool. Journal, meditate. Now I'm going to learn Photoshop for 30 minutes. So at the beginning, I'm just like, start the program. After that, I'm like, how do I draw a circle? How do I change the colors? How do I change the text? And then you're like, wow, I just created a thumbnail image. Cool. I just did 95% of what I need to do to be a creator. Oh, what's next? And that's how you create it all.
Fantastic.
I love it. I love it. Rob, we talk a lot about leadership, and really our existence is about hustle and hustle leadership. So you read a lot about the work environment today, whether it's remote work or hybrid work, whatever it might be. But I'd love for you to talk about what you do and in leadership. For those listening who lead a team, who lead people, how can they take what you do and what you teach and make themselves a better leader?
I love this question. And the answer I'm going to give is not the answer most people are going to expect. It's actually who you are. So leadership to me is living by example. And I had someone who was thinking about doing some coaching with me. And they said, Rob, I really want to be a coach one day, just like you. And anytime I hear that, it's cool. I'm a champion for everyone. But I never set out to be a coach. Like I said, my dream was to work in sports for my whole life. But for a decade straight, I worked on my personal growth and development full time, and I was all in on it. So I knew that if I got better every single day and turned myself into the best version of myself, no one could ever take away from me two things: what I learned in my mindset. So no matter what else happened in my life, if I'm making $0 for a decade straight, hey, if I'm getting better, I'm getting closer to all of this. So for me, I see leadership in a similar way, that I ended up writing a post right after that call with that guy. And I really said, instead of wanting to be a coach, start living like a coach. And what does this mean to me? Like, it's great that I can help accelerate the speed in which someone wants to do something. I can help them create new insights, new perspectives, new momentum. I can help them jump levels very quickly. But at the end of the day, when I had no money, the thing that I taught myself for my growth mindset was free. Podcasts and books cost me nothing. So I had this hunger to learn and to learn and to learn. So I was a coach before I was ever a coach, because I lived that way. And leadership is the exact same way, that lead by example, lead by design. And then through the structures that you create in your life, the habits, routines, the mindsets, the systems, these are the things that you can impart on your team. Because how in the world do you go from sports creator to coach to somehow having a coaching program and a digital platform? Well, all I had to do is reverse engineer everything that I had taught myself in the last decade to transform myself. So I was a one-of-one student. It's like, oh, well, if I can do it for myself, I wasn't this person. And the same is true for leadership, because you can then impart the systems and processes. And if you say, well, Rob, I don't have systems and processes, you then as a leader have a hole in your boat, because systems scale. And that's the next part of leadership here, is your vision of being able to scale yourself. So you can lead by example, but if you can't systematize how you can recreate and build up your leaders from a 5 and a 6 to a 7 or an 8 or a 9 or a 10, that's the opportunity for you.
It's incredible.
I agree. So piggybacking off that, with leadership, what's the one thing someone can do right now? And I feel like we've had this conversation and you've listed a bunch of things. But if someone's listening right now, what's the one thing that's going to be the most impactful they can do right now as a leader or someone who aspires to be a leader?
The number one thing you can do is ask yourself about your self-awareness. Say, am I self-aware? And this blows my mind. For the first 30 years of my life, at no point through kindergarten through 12th grade, and then 4 years of college, and then 10 years of corporate America, did any human in the world say, hey, Rob, let me teach you about self-awareness. Like,
No.
Literally, it was like speaking hieroglyphics. Someone's like, self-awareness. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. How is that humanly possible? Blows my mind right now that the entire system everywhere failed. So to me, I feel like it's my duty. And I know this seems pretty obvious because I'm talking to two high performers like you, and anybody who's listening to this right now, they're about this life. So this should be pretty obvious. But oftentimes the fundamentals are simple, but it doesn't mean that everybody has the fundamentals. So start with your self-awareness. And I think to the very first day of entrepreneurship for me, and I'm standing in my living room and there was no one to tell me when to wake up, what to do, what to eat, when to go to bed. Do I work out? Do I watch TV? Do I go kick it with my friends? Everything was on me. And I sat there and the realization became, whoa, everything's on me? You're telling me I get to design all of this. There's nobody else around me to tell me what to do. And a lot of people would take that as a big weight of like, holy crap, you're telling me I've got to figure all of this out? And I'm sitting here and I'm like, you're telling me I get to create all of this? And it's a very simple thing for leadership, but start with your self-awareness. And Chris, you talked about it at the very beginning. This is a choice and you get to choose. All right, am I going to be intentional about every single aspect of my life? And this goes down to your thoughts, your actions, your habits, routines, your mindsets, literally every single thing. Because the only thing that we have is this moment. You can't do anything about the past, and we can't control the future. Therefore, let's design amazing moments. Moment. And you do that over and over again. And that starts by auditing your self-awareness. And if you say, no, nobody's ever taught me about self-awareness or ever understood what this is. And there's levels to self-awareness, but ultimately it's understanding that I'm in charge of every single aspect of my life. And as you think about that with a leader, you are in charge of every single aspect of not only you, but your team. And there's a great book that I love, which is actually, Dustin, one of my core values, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, which essentially says, as a leader, you're in control of every single aspect of your team, including if and when your team messes up, because you as a leader, that is on you. And for me, it goes from self-awareness to extreme ownership. And those are two massive chasms, but they're actually right next to each other.
That is
That was
another
awesome.
excellent book. And it's interesting when you talk about extreme ownership, it's such a simple concept, but so many people struggle with it because when their team makes a mistake, it's that moment of truth where that as a leader, you may have had nothing to do with it, quote unquote, but that mindset of, well, ultimately that's your team. It's your job to lead them, to care for them, to direct them, to help them, to guide them. And it's been amazing when you see the difference in leadership styles, when somebody has that extreme ownership, how the team buys in at such a different level, as opposed to the, call it the manager type, as opposed to the leader type that really takes no real ownership in what the team does from a negative perspective. They'll take all the accolades potentially, but a lot of times not when things go wrong.
Yeah, it's really about that no excuses life, because quite frankly, as you continue to move up and you become more of a leader, more of a king, that excuses don't serve us. They're not going to help us create more of what we want in our life. And quite frankly, they're actually limiting us. So it's a hole in the boat and a blind spot if you're someone who sees excuses of, well, that's not on me. It's like, no, take ownership of everything that's going on in your life and in your world. And this becomes about accountability. And this is how you show up. This is your lens for the world. And once again, I love how circular this conversation is, because this is the same thing that we were talking about with the obstacle is the way, in creating the lens of the world of overcoming adversity and turning it into the opportunity. So when most people see it as excuses, we see it as an opportunity to plug a hole in our boat. So yeah, it's going to sting a little bit, but at the same time, you can look at it and say, man, I am so thankful because I limited the damage. And essentially, as you move up, the failures in your life, one of my favorite quotes from Alabama head coach Nick Saban, never waste a failure. And that quote is so good because it is literally on the highest level. When most people, Chris, were talking about imperfect on purpose, it's like, oh my God, I can't let anybody see me be bad or negative or anything like this. Nick Saban's like, boom, you better not be wasting that failure. Or Dustin, in this case, with extreme ownership, your team doesn't do good, and now you're taking it on the chin from the higher up. Well, let's not waste this, because ultimately we're looking to minimize the downside of the future challenges, because we're all going to hear in the word of entrepreneurship being like, well, that was only a $10,000 failure. That was only a $50,000 failure. That was only a $1 million failure. We're trying to learn these bad boys before that number gets higher and higher.
You bet. A lot of one of the terms I really like is fail forward, right? Fail, learn from it, move forward. And when you have those and you view those as a positive, a learning opportunity to continue to get better, your mindset shifts completely. And it's back to that positivity, right? You see the obstacle, you see the failure. It doesn't scare you, it doesn't shy you away, it doesn't prevent action. You just run through that wall.
Yeah, there's two great books by Trevor Moawad, who has since passed away, and he was Russell Wilson's mental coach. And the first book is It Takes What It Takes, and the second book is Getting to Neutral. And it's an amazing feat. And I think the example he gives in the book is in one of the playoff games, I think Russell Wilson in the first half, it may have been against Green Bay, threw 4 interceptions, having the worst game of his life. But at the end of the game, the Seahawks were still in the playoff game, and he led them down the field to the game-winning drive to ultimately win the game. And when he breaks it down, what he talks about is, and Dustin, to what you're saying about failing forward, boom, he throws the interception. He's getting to neutral where he's saying, listen, I can't dwell on the fact that I just threw an interception. That happens 4 more times where it's like worst game, worst game, worst game, worst game. And the thing that makes the best, the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans of the world, they sit there and they say, yeah, but it's all about the next play.
That's so good. And by the way, that game against Green Bay still hurts because we are all Packer fans up here in Wisconsin. We remember that very vividly.
Wow. I mean, I've actually never had anybody who was a Packers fan when I've used that reference. That's incredible that I'm actually getting that correct.
Well, we've had multiple games in NFC championships where our team is choked. So we understand, and it's in the past. So it's all good. So we talked about this failure. Dustin says fail forward. I've always said that failure is a good thing. You can learn from your victories, but I think you often learn more from your failures. And so I've said many times online, I think failure is great. We both embrace hustle. I think you embrace hustle too. But there are these people out there still that are anti-hustle. They don't believe about the glass is half full, wearing the rosy colored glasses. They don't believe in the fail forward. What do you say to those people?
I don't say anything because, quite frankly, and I learned this the hard way, and it's actually more valuable than anything that I could say, is I can only help people who want this, who want to be helped. And I learned this so hard. So when I was running Bacon Sports in the first few years as a sports marketing agency, I saw such an opportunity to help sports bars. I looked at their marketing and I was like, it is crap. I was like, their social media, they've got a huge audience and they keep just telling me about their $10 buckets of Bud Light. And I'm the consumer of this. And I'm like, I can make this so much better. I can make so much more money for you. I can make so much better content for you. So I would talk to all of the sports bars about how I can help them create better content. And every single one of them is like, I have no interest in this whatsoever. And it just drove me nuts. I was like, how can they not see this? And after grinding on this for years, I learned you can't push a rock uphill. And I am not for people who need convincing that you want to be a part of this life. I am for people who say, you know what? I want this. I want this to be part of my life. I'm willing and ready to create this growth mindset. It doesn't mean I have all of the answers or any of the answers, but what I am willing to do is raise my hand and say, Rob, I want to get better. So, Chris, that's my answer, because those people who are going to continue to naysay, it's not up to any of us to convince them that all of a sudden our way is better. Because quite frankly, this discussion right now is a 1% of a 1% lifestyle and mindset. And I know this because this is how I live, and the overwhelming majority of the world does not see this. And while I see the rest of the world is crazy, they look at me like I've got 15 eyes. It's just like, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, all right, well, don't watch the news and instead do some gratitude. It'll make your life a lot better. Like, how dare you tell me how to wake up in the morning? And I'm like, whoa, I'm just over here living my life, doing my thing. And one of the quotes that I love that I actually learned from Grant Cardone, he says, the only way to change is to change. And it's such a simple concept, because at some point in my life, I was that person, Chris. I was not who I am today, but the pain of who I was, and actually the desire for what I wanted to create in my life was so strong that I was willing to at least entertain alternative ways of thinking and being and seeing the world to help me create more of what I want in my life. And Chris, that person who's like, the glass is half empty, they're just not self-aware because they're not auditing themselves, being like, well, would it serve me if I looked at this half full? I don't know if it is or not, but like, am I at least open to the possibility? And you sit there and you're like, how many people in the world are not at least open to the possibility? And for me, that's why I say I've got nothing to say to them.
That is amazing, Rob. I mean, everything you've said there is so great. One thing that we talk a lot about too is self-awareness. And for years, like you, I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't really even know how to talk about it, how to think about it, because I realized at that time I was not fully self-aware. But it also took something that I think is important that goes with that is honesty. You have to be honest with yourself. If you have those two things, then you can audit your past behavior, and then you'll know this is who I need to be or want to be. And I think that's important too. But Rob, the last chunk of information was a great way to wrap up this conversation and leave people nothing but inspired and wanting to be their best self, which is exactly what you do. So before we put a bow on this conversation, I'd love to take a few minutes and let you tell the listeners what you do and the services you offer.
Yeah. On myself, if you made it all the way this far, I want to hear from you because you're about this life. And I would just love to be a positive asset in your journey because Chris and Dustin, we both know that most people don't listen to everything. Granted, I listen to every single podcast all the way through because I love learning and I love being inspired and I'm captivated by these stories. But once again, this is a 1% of a 1%. And if you're someone who says, you know what, I want more of this in my life and I want to become my ideal self, then hit me up, robcressy.com. Or at Rob Cressy on all social media platforms. I've also got a podcast, Best Year Ever, which is all about creating your best year ever and the habits, routines, mindsets, and ways of being to do so. And I don't work with people like who are broken. And I say this not from we don't all have holes in our boat, but the majority of the people that I work with are already successful. They're hungry. They want more. And we all know that because we have growth mindsets, there's always more opportunities for us to be better in all areas of our life because we see all of the areas in which we can improve ourselves. And I'm someone who's a champion for you. And if you're looking for a coach who can help you on your journey to accelerate that, build better habits, routines, mindsets, ways of being, I would love to get down with you any way I can.
Awesome. Rob, any final thoughts?
Yeah, the last thing that I always love to leave people with is I believe in you. And that's Chris, Dustin, you, the listener right now. And I share this, and it's actually going to go back once again to the Ryan Holiday book, Where I Was at Zero. And I realized the number one thing that can get me to not quit on my dreams is belief. If I believe in myself, then I will make my dreams happen. And you get to create this unwavering belief in yourself. And oh, baby, is it hard? It is so challenging. But that's why this is such a rewarding journey. It's why we live this on a moment-to-moment, day-by-day basis, where every day is the opportunity to get better, and it's not always puppy dogs and rainbows, and hard times are going to happen. But I believe in you because you might look around and you're like, there's nobody who speaks like this, or who does this, or who is learning these things around me. And I know this. It's why I love talking to two amazing people like you guys, because I look around over the last decade and people are like, Rob, I don't even understand what you do. And this is like close friends and family members. And you know what I say? It's all good. It's not up to you to understand my dreams. I see the vision for it. And I want to let you know that I believe in you, that if you have something inside of you that you want to create in the world, do it. And know there's at least one other person plus Chris and Dustin. So now that's 3. There are 3 people in this world that believe in you and what you want to create. So take this seed, plant it in yourself, and go make it happen, because that's what your guys' podcast is all about.
Rob, thank you so much. Having people like you on our show has made podcasting more fun than I could imagine. And it does. I said it before and I'll say it again. It truly does. And it will leave me inspired throughout the evening and throughout the weekend. And we're very grateful for your time. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Rob.
Pleasure.
And now we can be off to our best year ever, right?
Amen.
What better way to start 2023? All right. Thank you, all you lovely listeners, for listening today. We appreciate your time and your listen. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.